So this right here is the iPhone Air, and there are some significant and surprising changes to the camera on this smartphone that I'm not seeing a lot of people talk about, but at the same time, I'm a little bit conflicted. So let's talk about it and go through all these examples, and big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video. We'll talk about them a little bit later on. So if you're new here, welcome to another episode of Photographer vs. Smartphone. In this series, I take my 10 years of photography experience and apply it to the latest and greatest smartphones to help you understand what is going on with these new cameras. Now, initially this video was going to be me just explaining how to get the best pictures possible with the iPhone Air, because I was under the impression from other videos out there that not much has changed with this camera. So when I took it out for my initial testing, I was shocked to see that there has been some major changes, the biggest one being how the images look and how they're processed. One of the big issues with iPhone photos is the fact that in the past, I've been very critical of this as well as other creators, the photos seem to be overly processed. Sometimes smartphone images have an issue with highlights and shadows, they look overly digital. With the iPhone Air, in my initial testing, I was shocked to see that a lot of these issues have been resolved. The best example of this is this photo of this diner sign. I made this image and got home and was looking at it on the computer and thought, no way, this looks very similar to an image I made with my Leica SL2 a few years back at this same location. And putting these photos side by side, they are shockingly similar straight out of camera. Hands down, the best look I've ever seen to an iPhone photo. And my whole goal initially with this series was to see how close are smartphones getting to professional cameras, and with this iPhone Air, we're getting a lot closer than I ever expected to be. So at this point, both the standard camera and the 2x zoom on the iPhone Air showed me something I'd never seen before. We had stellar depth of field from both camera lenses. Depth of field is the blurry part of an image, and we also had superior fall off control, meaning changes from highlights to shadows in an image, which I already mentioned are typically an issue with iPhone photos, but with these brief examples, those issues were not present. So at this point, I got a little skeptical and thought maybe I'm just overhyping this because it's a new phone. So I began doing tests comparing this to my iPhone 16 Pro, which has been my current phone for the last year. And my suspicions were correct. In this first example right here, notice how the image on the left, the iPhone Air photo, has significantly more contrast and color control, and also has less of a digitized look versus the iPhone 16 Pro. So clearly something is happening with the processing. And this became more apparent in this example of this succulent photo. When we zoom in on this image, you'll notice how much more detailed the iPhone Air image is versus the iPhone 16 Pro. The iPhone Air image looks like it came from any camera that I would use. When we zoom out to an image like this, you'll notice that there's not too much difference between the two photos. So this upgrade in processing could be situational depending on lighting, but one thing I noticed in these two examples is the fact that the iPhone Air image does have more contrast control and more control over the colors. Notice how in the iPhone 16 Pro image, the iPhone 16 Pro has more of a yellowish green throughout, and the separation in this color is more obvious in the iPhone Air photos. And the upgrades on the iPhone Air become even more apparent when we test the selfie camera versus the iPhone 16 Pro. One of the big upgrades to the iPhone 17s as well as the iPhone Air is this introduction of a square sensor to the selfie camera. And this selfie camera solves one of the biggest issues people ask me about when it comes to iPhones. As someone who understands cameras more than the average person, a lot of people who are casual users will ask me, hey, why do my selfies look so bad? The answer is in the processing of the images as well as the sensor. Now with the iPhone Air and all the iPhone 17 models, that is fixed. There is a substantial change to the skin tones, the color, the dynamic range, and that fall off between highlights and shadows, and the images look less processed from the iPhone Air. Now, with this selfie, I thought maybe I just got lucky, so I did this very basic example of this can of Coke in my kitchen. And when we zoom in on this can of Coke, you can clearly see that the iPhone Air image has much less grain on that can, and there is much more contrast control in the black areas of the can. So overall, there is definitely an improvement in this selfie camera when it comes to image quality. And this improvement to the quality is a huge win with the introduction of center stage, which is one of the big selling selling points of the iPhone Air as well as the 17 series, where you can make a landscape or portrait orientation selfie photo and still maintain quality because of that square sensor. When I tested this, both images look great shot at wide as well as standard, and when I use center stage mode for a well-lit situation of this shoe, I was really blown away by the detail and the way both of these images look. They are absolutely stellar, and if you told someone they were made with the front-facing camera on an iPhone, I think they would be very surprised. So seeing how well the selfie camera worked on the Air, I started to actually believe Apple when they said that the camera on the iPhone Air is the exact same as the 17 and 17 Pro. So I did a quick test of this because I do have the 17 Pro, which I'll make another video about later once I can test it more. Side by side with some basic examples, the iPhone Air and iPhone 17 Pro look virtually identical. You could make an argument that the iPhone Air actually looks a little bit better with the control of color, but that's up for you to decide. It's not a major difference. But just to make sure, I tested this a little bit further in the studio and made these flat lay images. Notice how the iPhone Air and 17 Pro basically look the exact same even when we zoom in on them. Notice how the lens details looks relatively similar. Now, one more thing I just wanted to test really quick was the iPhone 16e versus the iPhone Air, because they are both of Apple's single lens cameras. I assumed the 16e wouldn't be the same as the Air, but just to be safe, I did a quick side-by-side test, and based on the test, the iPhone 16e does not look as good. There's a lot more green going on in the 16e, and when you zoom in on this image, you can clearly tell that the iPhone Air is much smoother between the highlights and shadows in the details, and there's more grain present in the iPhone 16e, and the image just looks a little bit overly processed. But that's to be expected. It's a significantly less expensive camera than the iPhone Air. I just wanted to make sure. And with that said, there's one more thing to mention about the Air. When you're setting up the iPhone Air, you have the option to use 24 megapixel or 48 megapixel for your camera. I did a side-by-side test, and I highly recommend using 48 megapixels. When you're using 24 megapixels, there is a little bit more noise and less control over the highlights and shadows, and honestly, the file size between the two is such a small difference. It's a no-brainer to just go ahead and set your phone on 48 megapixels so you get that bump in your image quality. So based on that testing, it's very obvious we're seeing an upgrade to image processing on the iPhone Air as well as the 17 Pro, and we're seeing the upgrade to the selfie camera on the iPhone Air, which I believe is very significant. Those photos looked so much better than the 16 Pro, but we're also seeing those changes on the 17 Pro, which leads me to where I'm a little bit conflicted on the iPhone Air and where I see some negatives in this. But before I talk about that and give you my final thoughts, I want to thank today's sponsor, Squarespace.
If you're creating anything and sharing it online, even if it's just with your smartphone and you don't have a website, you are missing out on so many opportunities. My website, evanramp.com, is built with today's sponsor, Squarespace, and my website allows me to, one, connect with my audience outside of social media, which is arguably the most important function of a website in today's social media era. You build this audience, you spend so much time growing your creativity, and then one day the algorithm shifts and all of a sudden you have no way to get in touch with your followers. Unless you have a website and you've built up an email list, and Squarespace makes it so easy to build email lists with their marketing tools as well as their subscription tools and their newsletter tools. And Squarespace also allows you as an artist to sell your work. If you create prints, maybe you create digital products or even a course, Squarespace allows you to easily give this value to the people who find you online. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds really difficult. That's the beauty of Squarespace. Squarespace has award-winning templates that are drag and drop with tools like Fluid Engine that allow you to literally move things around on your page. My website, evanramp.com, was built in one afternoon, and you're in luck because I have a video breaking down exactly how I built my website. I'll link it in the description under a tab called Website Resources. And if you're someone who wants to speed up the process even more, Squarespace has incorporated AI tools into their website building functions to help you get inspiration and create a site with ease. So like I said, if you're creating anything and sharing it online and you don't have a website, you are missing out on so many opportunities. So go to squarespace.com/evanramp, start a free trial, build out a trial site, see all the great things Squarespace allows you to do. And when you're ready to sign up, use code EvanRamp to save 10% at checkout. That's squarespace.com/evanramp, start a free trial and use code EvanRamp to save 10% at checkout. Big thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring today's video.
So before I share my personal issues with the iPhone Air, I do want to talk about a few issues that are floating around online. A lot of people are concerned with the battery life. For me, I didn't notice any major issues, but the way I use my phones is typically I just put them on a charger when I'm sitting at my desk or when I'm just not using it. So if you're someone like me who throws your phone on a charger for maybe even 30 minutes throughout the day, you're not going to notice any issue. If you're someone who does grind your phone battery down every single night, unfortunately, I can't speak to that, so you might want to check out another review. But that leads us to the personal issue I have with the iPhone Air and why I'm a little bit conflicted on this smartphone. While the camera capability is incredible, you are giving up an ultra-wide camera on the iPhone Air. For some people, that might not be a big deal, but I found myself in testing at times wanting to click that ultra-wide button and realizing, oh wait, that's not there. So maybe if you're someone who's never had that before, it won't be a big issue, but if you're someone going from something like a Pro or even a standard iPhone, I guarantee you'll have that same thing happen to you where you're out making a picture, you want to go ultra wide and say, oh yeah, this phone doesn't have it. And one more thing to mention, the iPhone Air does not have the ability to shoot RAW files. That's to be expected because all of the processing is contained in such a small piece of this phone. But when you have RAW files on an iPhone, you can obviously take out a lot of that digitization that happens. You can customize the photos more in editing, but personally, I thought the photos looked stellar on the iPhone Air, so you could probably get away with using the iPhone photo styles, which have continued to get better, or you could slap on a basic edit in Lightroom, even though the image is not raw, and get away with it. But for me, my big issue with the iPhone Air is the fact that you're giving up a lot, and in my opinion, you're not gaining anything that outweighs it. Yes, the photo is thin, but it's not thin enough to where I had this big reaction when I opened it. Honestly, when I opened the phone, I said to myself, that's it. I thought this was going to be something that was groundbreaking. I personally was expecting something a little bit thinner, and when I was using this phone, I did enjoy having something a little bit lighter and smaller in my pocket, but the change wasn't significant enough for me to give up some of that processing power for RAW files and give up that ultra-wide camera. So if you're someone out there who doesn't care about more professional things, you're going to absolutely love this, and you're going to love the novelty of this thinner experience. But if you're someone who is coming from an iPhone Pro and you're considering moving to this, I personally think that you're going to find yourself missing features and missing some of the abilities of the Pro model. But here's the thing, you can make the exact same argument for the initial MacBook Air. The first MacBook Air gave up so much, but it was a laptop that could fit into an envelope. The iPhone Air feels like the exact same thing to me. We right now have something where we're giving up a lot for engineering innovation, and over time, just like the MacBooks, I think the standard is going to become having this thin technology worked into phones that are a little bit more powerful. I was very impressed by this. I just wish it had more, but I also understand that engineering is a thing, and right now that's not possible. So maybe in the future you'll see me using the next iPhone Air, but for now, for creative people and people who are interested in photography, it doesn't have everything that I would personally want. So let me know your thoughts, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, catch you next time.